Doctor Who Doctor by Doctor. First Doctor Era Overview plus Top 10 Stories. The era of the First Doctor, as played by the late great William Hartnell, ran from November 1963 to October 1966 and lasted just over 3 seasons. He appeared in no less than 134 episodes over 29 multi-part stories and launched a television legend. The First Doctor was a crabby old codger whose often stern outward appearance masked both a heart of gold and a sense of humor that was as frequently every bit as mischievous and subversive as any of his successors. And no, in case there are any newbies watching this, he wasn't in the slightest bit fucking sexist either, whatever the shameless cunt-infested bad joke of a shit show that his new poo would now apparently have you believe. The Doctor's first set of companions were his granddaughter Susan, played by Carol Ann Ford, and two 60s teachers, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, played by William Russell and Jacqueline Hill, who remain two of the best companions in the history of the series. Susan left early in the second season and was replaced by the lovely Vicky, played by Maureen O'Brien, who is another of my all-time favorite companions. In the penultimate story of Season 2, Ian and Barbara left the series and were replaced by a solo male companion, space-age astronaut Stephen Taylor, played by Peter Purvis. Vicky left the series early in the third season, eventually replaced by Dodo Chaplet, played by Jackie Lane. Toward the end of the third season, both Stephen and Vicky left the series and were replaced by two hip new 60s companions in the form of Ben Jackson and Polly Wright, as played by Michael Craze and Anna Quills. The era of the First Doctor was ambitious, wildly imaginative and educational, initially splitting its focus between wild science fiction space stories and gritty historical adventures firmly set on Earth. The era introduced the Daleks and the Cybermen, still the two most iconic monster races in all of Doctor Who, and even introduced another member of the Doctor's own race in the form of the meddling monk in the climax to Season 2, the Time Meddler, though he is not named as a Time Lord as yet. Early in the fourth season, the First Doctor collapsed to the floor of the TARDIS, clearly in severely ill health, and to contemporary viewers it must have looked like the Doctor had his day, only for the Hartnell era to deliver one last moment of mythology-defining shocks, in the form of regeneration. William Hartnell had launched a television institution. Top 10 Stories. 10. The Reign of Terror. The First Doctor and company get caught up in the French Revolution in this long but always entertaining historical potboiler that, as is one of the era's defining features, conjures up its historical milieu and atmosphere with uncanny believability and authenticity even on a small budget. 9. The Aztecs. Another historical story, this time with Barbara attempting to play God with Aztec civilization and trying to turn them away from the barbaric practice of human sacrifice that will ultimately lead to their genocide by the Spanish. Needless to say, it doesn't go down too well with the natives. 8. The War Machines. A decided oddity in the Hartnell era, which introduces that perennial Who subgenre of the Doctor aiding the military to battle a powerful foe in modern London that would become a staple during the Pertwee era. The War Machines is a fun romp that seems familiar now only because of how often the trope was reused in later eras. 7. The Romans. History meets humor in this unusual take on the historical genre, which sees writer Dennis Spooner attempting to do a lighter take on the normally fairly grim subgenre, and succeeds in creating a thoroughly enjoyable romp with the fantastic Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky team on sparkling form. 6. Marco Polo. Probably only not higher because the visuals don't exist. Even in crude animated form, Marco Polo sells itself on the strength of its performances, script and dialogue, which are clearly top-notch in every department. Why the fuck hasn't this been found yet? 5. An Unearthly Child. The very first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child, is more than just a top-notch first episode in my opinion. Even the much maligned caveman story that follows it is gripping, strange and intense in the conviction with which everyone puts into the story, as Ian and Babs' first trip in the TARDIS proves a decidedly harrowing one. 4. The Crusade. 50% of this gripping historical story is missing, begging the question of why we haven't had an official animation of the other half yet, especially since the 50% we do have are among the best episodes of Doctor Who ever made. Utterly riveting with brilliant performances and top-notch scripting, The Crusade is more adult, intelligent and sophisticated than all of New Who put together. 3. The Daleks. The very first Daleks story, and only the second story ever, The Daleks remains a powerful piece of telly in its own right. An eerie, spooky and compelling piece of 60s sci-fi with a truly unbeatable atmosphere. 2. The Chase. The Chase seems to be more popular these days than it once was, with a more po-faced fandom, but I have always loved this ridiculous comic book romp that sees the Daleks get a timed machine and chase the Doctor and his friends through time and space because they're so pissed off at him for fucking them up twice. And they can't even manage to get that right. A glorious send-off for Ian and Barbara and a breakup for one of the best TARDIS teams ever. The Chase is just endlessly rewatchable, warm and goofy fun. 1. The Time Meddler. The Time Meddler is my favorite story of the Hartnell era. It's not an action-packed epic laden with Daleks and space battles, and even its major mythology impact of the first appearance of another of the Doctor's people is played down as much as possible. It's just a beautifully atmospheric, gently humorous, beautifully written, acted and impeccably produced piece of Sunday afternoon lovely likeable Doctor Who. Oh, and Vicky is as adorable as all fuck in it. I love this story. The era of the first Doctor is one of my absolute favorite periods of Doctor Who, along with the fourth and seventh Doctor eras, with the brilliant William Hartnell one of the absolute best Doctors and some of the best companions in the history of the series. Although production problems result in the third season perhaps not quite being up to the standards of the first two, which were produced by the great Verity Lambert, the imagination, audacity and sheer we don't give no fucks how low our budget is, we're doing anything we fucking like attitude of the program makers make it light years ahead of the more conservative attitudes of other eras, particularly dreary old New Who with its preference over shoving PC bollocks down your throat rather than actually coming up with inventive stories because, you know, that would actually take fucking talent and effort. Now wouldn't it? I fucking love the Hartnell era and, you know what, to fuck with it, and to fuck with Stephen Moffat, I'm giving it a full-on hard as nails A fucking plus.